Should be over on YouTube, so I'm just going to wait until I can see the stream. And we'll get into it.
I like your little light switch on and off. Is that an analogy for something?
Oh, I could hear. Yeah, normally I have my background behind me, but we're in the move, so I've got to set everything up now. So I've been doing the podcast and all my coaching in like various spots. So next show I should have all my equipment back up. I at least have one light today, so getting the production back up. We've kind of regressed for a little bit. So.
I like the light switch. It's like you can turn on and off the comments.
Okay, give me 1 second. We are live, and here we go. Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. As you know, we are currently overcoming extreme censorship, so if you'd like to support this show, share episodes far and wide, consider becoming a member at mattbelair.com, where you can access exclusive content. You can do so for free or by donation, but the best way to support this show is to consider doing 3 kind acts wherever you are in the world today. Today's guest is an entrepreneur, author, public speaker, athlete, and philanthropist. As a former sedentary, overweight smoker, he knew that he needed to focus not on what others wanted out of him, but what he wanted out of life. With his first book, Winning in the Middle of the Pack, he discusses how to get more out of ourselves than ever imagined. Now he shares the interconnected stories of others overcoming obstacles, specifically cancer, in his second book, Cycle of Lives. Welcome to the show, David Richman.
Thanks, Matt. Very excited to talk to you.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. Well, too bad we didn't get you on with your first book. We have a lot to discuss because that one sounds amazing, and you've been doing a lot of really great work. We had an awesome discussion before a few weeks before airing this. So, you've been doing a lot of interesting things, and I'd just love for you to share just a little about your background, how you got to, changing what you were doing to writing the first book, and then where you are now.
Sure. Well, everybody has their own path. Mine is certainly different than most of the people that you know and work with, because you're dealing with people that are peak performers, super high level athletes and really top of their field. I was this guy that didn't do anything athletic really my whole life until I got to my late 30s. And I found myself at this like super low point in life where I was completely stressed out. I was in a, physically and emotionally abusive relationship. I was overweight. I was a smoker. I was not living my best life, to say it in the nicest way. And, at that same time period when I was just like reaching rock bottom, I got a call from my sister that she's been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And and at the same time, I kind of have this wake up call that a friend, kind of took a sledgehammer and smacked me over the head with it because confronted me when I was complaining about my problems. And he was like, dude, you're the problem. Like, they're not the problem. You're the problem. Like, deal with your own crap. And I was like, wait a second. You mean I might be the one that's at fault here? I might be the one that has issues. I might be the one that needs to fix myself and not other things. And so all that happened at once. And I just said, screw it. I looked in the mirror and I said, who the heck are you? And I didn't like it. And I said, who do you want to be? And I was just like, wow, every you give me is far away from where you're at. So you better just start taking a step forward. So with athletics, I did that. I did a little 2-minute run. I barely could make it 2 minutes. And then a couple of weeks later, I muscled up a mile and a 5K and then a 10K. And a couple of months later, did a half Ironman. A couple of months later, did a full Ironman, and kind of have never stopped since on the athletic front. I still just a couple of weeks ago did a 24-hour bike ride in Texas. I've done 5,000-mile bike rides and 25-hour runs, and you name it, I've done it. And long cry from not being able to run 2 minutes.
And did you find when you went with the athletics that was helping you solve a lot of that, like the emotional problems, the mental blocks, or whatever you were struggling with mentally? Did you find like just having yourself and taking care of like the physical aspect, even though you're terrible to start with, just that kind of aim help filter out some of the other aspects of your life?
Yeah, that was the draw of doing what would become for me extreme athletics, right? Extreme endurance athletics. That was the draw because I was always so busy and hyperactive and so crazy at trying to live in the chaos that I was creating, Matt, that I never did take time to contemplate, to inner reflect, to, have any sense of Zen or peace or, oneness with the world or anything. I was just moving too fast. And when you're on a bike for 10 hours or you're running in the desert for 50 miles, you got nothing to do but contemplate. And it's a really wonderful thing. And it was a big draw for me because I could not only solve problems out there, but I could start to learn to ask myself better questions and really come to things with a different mindset. And I don't think we often take the time or make the time to really go deep with these inner dialogues we need to have with ourselves to change our narratives. It's always just like, hey, I'm moving and I'll deal with that when I can. And you just never take time to self-reflect. I know you do. You can't go in the forest for a couple of weeks and not talk to people and not come out enlightened. I mean, you do, because you have different conversations with yourself, and endurance athletics gave me the vehicle to learn that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I've said about meditation, like a lot of people say they struggle with meditation, it's just sitting down and practicing watching the mind. But an easier way often is go for long walks. You know what I mean? Like endurance athletics is a great idea. So go for a 10-kilometer walk or a 5-kilometer walk through a forest, right? Just walk, do nothing else. And you don't have to try to stay focused, although you can just do that thing. And so especially when you're long bike rides, long running, long swimming, you're in your own world, you know what I mean? And you get into these meditative states. And it's also a reflective process, because what we're really doing, many of us anyway, is we're waking up and we're going with the tasks of the day. And then when we're not doing a task, we're sitting down and then we're receiving information from, our screens, right? Whether it's TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, whatever the case is, there's no just silence, right? We used to eat at our dinner table. I'm just in that generation barely, where you'd eat at the dinner table, there'd be no screens and no distractions. And so, this is a very important way to begin self-reflection. So if you don't want to do meditation per se, you can do sports or athletics that call to you, whatever those are, which I think is really important. And then you can also consider doing things like art, painting, music, whatever that is, anything that's going to engage you in the moment. So I think that's really, really interesting. And so for you, like, I want to touch on this. How quick did you do it? Do you say an Ironman? Because those are incredibly hard. It sounds like you did it from nothing and then completed one within a year, which I'm in shape now, and I don't think I could do that.
Right. Well, you could if you were drawn to figure it out, right? Like I'm sure you could do it. Anybody could do it if they wanted to. It's just a matter of how badly do you want to do it. So yeah, it was tough. I mean, there's no question that I kind of pushed myself. But what I came to learn is, like, I had been pretty successful in business at this point in my life, at that low point, and I had accomplished quite a number of positive things. And what I realized is that I had no problem digging myself a really, really deep hole and learning how to get out of it. Right. Like that was a challenge for me. That was a really good thing for me. But oftentimes I would dig myself a hole, not in a positive way. Right. So taking on a challenge such as saying, oh, I'm going to go do an Ironman, even though I've never even, run, biked or swam before, that was a kind of hole I wanted to dig to figure out how to get out of it. And it's shocking how you could set your goals way higher than you ever imagined, and they're still not high enough. And so to do an Ironman, it's really just wanting to do it. And making the time to train for it if you can, or you got to, obviously make choices and make some sacrifices. But it did that when it came to an Ironman or a 50-mile run. And then I did a 100K run, and then I did a 100-mile run. And then, you can do it if you want to do it. I'm not saying you should want to do it, but if you did want to do it. And for me, Matt, that came with one of the very first events that I did was a super long rollerblade race. It was like 140K on rollerblades. Stupid, awesome. Right? Just
sounds like a Canadian thing to do.
I know, right? Well, it was in Georgia, Canada, same thing. So I did this event and I had no business doing it. Right? I was completely not athletic, not coordinated, not prepared for what would be 140K on rollerblades over hills and up and down hills. It was ridiculous. And about 30 miles in, so about a third of the way through, I had hit the wall. I was done, depleted, completely dehydrated. At the end of my rope, I had no business going any further. And that's when it hit me. I'm like, dude, you got two choices. You either can pack it up and go home, go back to your lifestyle, or take your new lifestyle or whatever. You found your limit. Like, that's it. That's the farthest you can go. You're done. I was on the side of the road, puking my guts out, sweating like a pig, done. And I'm like, just go home. Like, you figured it all out, dude. You figured out your limits. Or you could just go one more step, like figure out how to get one more foot down the road, right? And eventually 6 hours or so later, I made it to the finish line. And it wasn't about like accomplishing the goal. It was about learning. What could I learn about myself? What could I overcome? What could I deal with? What could I handle more of? And that became not a drug really, but a quest for knowledge. Like who am I? What am I made of? And what am I willing to do to accomplish, something that I'm trying to set out to accomplish? And so endurance athletics, I found early on is a great teacher as well.
That's an amazing story. Well, it reminds me of, David Goggins, where I think in the books somewhere they say where, I don't know where this comes from exactly, but when you think you're done, you're only 40% done. And this is something that I learned training with the Shaolin monks, because they basically just were the most ruthless personal trainers that you could ever imagine. And that was the whole point of the training, is just putting you, light years beyond what you think you're capable of doing. Right. And then that makes you realize, wow, I'm capable of so much more than when I shut down. And so, with your journey of athletics and also being successful in business, what advice do you have for people who are, let's just say, everyday people who want to live a meaningful life? They want to, provide for their family, but they also want to do meaningful work. Like, what have you learned for applying that, change? Because sometimes people have the wealth, but then they don't have the physical side where maybe they're out of shape because they're sacrificing things too much, or they don't love their work. And so they want to figure out something more meaningful, because whatever it is, it's kind of like that next step, you know what I mean? Or pushing yourself a little bit further. So you take responsibility for being a parent and all the things that you do, but you also want to move towards meaningful work and be successful in business. And what I found is that you can be successful in business doing what you love, but you might be making sacrifices in different spots. And so, right. And it might be as much as you think, but if you're going into it solely for the money, then you shouldn't even start, you know what I mean? Because there's always ways that you can piece it together, but there's definitely opportunity for success. And I feel like it's that fear. You know what I mean? How we construct our lives. We have a lot of this downtime and a lot of observing the screens. And I think in Stoicism, they call it dead time, right? Where you're just, you're ingesting the play and you're ingesting the TV and you're ingesting, the sports, rather than, what am I creating and what's important for me to create? Then I'll just kind of go back to that first thing that you mentioned, where your friend called you out and you realize you're the source of all your problems. And I think of this meme that goes around where it's just like somebody's riding the bike and they put the stick between their own wheel and they flip off the bike. It's just, it's so funny. Or they do the Scooby-Doo, and it's just like, who's the source of all my problems? And they lift it. It's like, it's me. Right. So I just love that initial thing. We have to take responsibility for everything in our life. You know what I mean? And then from there, we can then find the solutions.
Yeah, well, happiness is a very interesting thing, right? Because if you're chasing success and happiness is money, I guarantee you, unless you're Elon Musk, there's somebody in the room that's richer. Okay, there is. And if it's athleticism that you're looking at, unless you're Michael Jordan, unless you're Rafael Nadal, unless you're Wayne Gretzky, there's somebody better in the room. There's somebody more athletic. There's somebody better looking. There's somebody healthier. There's somebody that's smarter. There's somebody that's a better writer. There's somebody that's better a coach. You name it. I don't care. Right. So the goal should not be to accomplish more accumulation or more accolades. I think the goal is, once you kind of have the basics covered, shelter, safety, comfort, that anything above that kind of doesn't lead to happiness. For me, happiness and contentment is found in relationships and in the connectivity and the authenticity of those relationships, the depth of the relationships that you have. And I only I feel that way, Matt, because when I dealt with talking to hundreds and hundreds of people about trauma, end of life issues, cancer survivorship, those type of things. When it comes to them contemplating their death or watching somebody that they love at the end of their life, really boils down to two things. The person has a sense of pride and accomplishment and a sense of peace over the relationships that they formed that are deep. And they have a sense of regret over the relationships that they didn't pursue or that weren't as deep as they could have been. People don't cry about, I should have worked more, I should have had more money, I should have done. No, it's all about relationships. And I think that the effect that you can have on others and the way you let others have an effect on you is real. Once you get like to where you can sustain the basics of human life, which not everybody can, but once you get to that level, I think contentment, happiness, peace comes from relationships and the depth of those relationships. And so that's been the focus of my life for many, many years now.
That's really beautiful and a very powerful insight. I remember an interview I did a long time ago with a man named Frank Ostaseski, and he is the creator of Zen Hospice, and he works with a lot of people in hospice care, and shared the 5 invitations from his book, which I actually can't even remember right now. But people, I suggest you check it out. And it's all these things that are, what is most important? Like, are we taking stock in our life? Are we the 80-20 rule also comes to mind. Is this like, are we spending 80 or 90% of our time spinning our wheels and then leaving all this most important stuff to the side for later? Like, oh, I gotta really work hard today to sacrifice my relationship with my son or my daughter or whatever the case is, right? It's like finding these balances, but really putting on the board, right, what is most important to you, and making sure that as you go about your day and your week and your month, that you're really making sure that you're taking care of these things rather than sacrificing them. And if you have to sacrifice them for a bit to get to another goal, that's okay, right? But you're just cognizant of what you're doing. Otherwise, we seem to be in this like accomplish and acquire mindset where it will never be full. And so many people have come on this podcast, and we've heard them in many talks say, I had everything. I had all the money, I had all the fame, I had all the success, but there was this big gaping hole. And I feel like relationships are another big key. And when you, well, I guess let's get into like why you wrote the book and mm-hmm. some of the other things you learned from speaking to all these people who, maybe were contemplating the end of their life, which was coming, or even just losing, a loved one, and how the family would grieve that. Because I've always told my friends and family, like, if I die, don't worry, don't cry. Like, I'm fine with the other side. However, you can't die. I am not emotionally capable of losing you. You need to stay here.
That's awesome.
I need to hug you. You know
right.
what I mean? So I'm just curious what you learned in those kind of fields.
Yeah. So that's a fantastic insight, because, we really can't contemplate our own death, but we really, can't contemplate that anybody's death, really. I mean, we can understand it. We can make an intellectual sense of it, but from an emotional level, it's not something that we can wrap our brains around very easily. So oftentimes we don't talk about it. We don't talk about bad things. We tend to say, oh, I'm sorry. When you hear somebody's going through something difficult, and then you extricate yourself so that you don't have to have that hard conversation of how do you feel about it. And that was for me, the draw. So when my sister was diagnosed with terminal cancer, it forced me, it gave me the opportunity to really observe what was going on with people, and doctors, patients, loved ones, caregivers, didn't matter, Matt. When it came to like the tasks, the triage around the trauma, like how do I eat better, sleep better, find the right doctor, navigate the healthcare system, how do I reduce stress, those kind of things people talk about all day long. But when it came to how do you feel about it? How do you feel about talking to your friends? Did somebody abandon you because they don't know how to deal with you? How does that make you feel? I mean, when it comes to these type of things, silence. And so I said, boy, how can we find out why? Why is that? Why is it so hard for us to have these kind of emotional conversations? And so I found a bunch of doctors and patients and loved ones and survivors and caregivers and you name it. Young, old, one and done with cancer, was an oncologist their whole life with cancer, you name it, all different perspectives. And then what I said, Matt, was I said, talk to me about your childhood and your young adulthood, the traumas that you incurred. whether it was the suicide of a parent or abandonment, drug addiction, losing your way. In my case, it was not finding my way until later in life. Whatever the traumas were that put you in the place where you are today, how did those affect you and your ability or inability to navigate the emotional side of cancer, no matter what the perspective? And so if I could relate to that, if I could understand who Matt is as a person and the things that he's gone through and the things that he's dealing with, then maybe when I know that you're going through something difficult, it might give me an insight on how to connect with you on a deeper, more meaningful level. And so that's what I wrote out the book, not to give answers, but just to give people a really deep insight in the darkest, most private areas of your life, what made you the way you are on an emotional level, so I could understand how to better relate to you. So that's what the goal of the book was.
That's beautiful. And in my own research of just dealing with people and coaching, what I found like a great gift for people is really quality listening. I like to share the story of my friend Clifford Mahudi, who's unfortunately passed. He's a Zuni elder, and we were in a circle, and his eyes were closed. Everybody would go around and speak, right? And so I'm like, Clifford wouldn't close his eyes, like he's not rude. So what's he doing? And then it gets around to him, and he had his eyes closed because he was listening to everybody with all of his might. And I always just found that so funny. He's like listening as hard as he could. And very often we talk to people, but we don't listen. And the gift of listening to feel understood, right? And one exercise I give a lot of my coaching clients when within their own relationships, or if they become coaches themselves, is listen to people, then repeat back what you heard, and then ask if there's anything else. It's so simple, but then it's not like, oh, okay, I'm assuming that I know all this or feel that way. But when you get that clarity, now they really feel understood. And then that makes them feel appreciated, and that makes them feel valued, and that makes them feel special, and it makes them feel enough. And that comes from another human being, right? And we can give that to other people. So to see that you did that in your circumstances with these people is phenomenal. And hopefully we can take that to all the relationships in our life, because this is something you can give to everybody on a daily basis, right? When you talked about learning about the quality of relationship, to actively listen, to care, right? To not need to have your mind distracted with 1,000 different things, but that one person you're focusing on. You'll know, I've seen it, in my own life and other people's life, when they're that person and I teach them that, often they'll get the reflection from people they randomly meet, just appreciation. I really like that person because they listened to me, you know what I mean? And I felt understood, and I felt cared for, and I felt appreciated. So it's an incredibly simple and very powerful thing. And in your book, you share 15 stories, and I'm curious if any one that you want to talk about or comes to mind that's just either the most powerful or uplifting. And, what's kind of the nature of the different 15? Are they different? Are some of them uplifting and some of them are depressing? Or
Right. Well, I'm dealing with heavy topics, right? We're dealing with heavy topics. We're dealing with suicide and abuse and abandonment and drug addiction and death and, all. But every story is inspiring. Everyone is uplifting. Some of them are a little bit tragic, but in that tragedy, either they or the reader can learn something meaningful and valuable. So I would say that although the stories are evocative and they're quite moving, I think they're very uplifting. I've done a bad job in marketing that, it's a book about cancer, and so therefore it's got to be depressing, but it's really not. And honestly, not every story has a happy ending, but there's very few stories that you get in depth and you know the characters, you learn the characters, and you identify with them and you empathize with them and you feel them. Even when bad things happen, you still can learn and take away positives. And it's that way in life. And so these are real stories. They're real people. Names are not changed to protect the innocent. Circumstances are all real, because I wanted to give people a raw, authentic, heart to heart, as deep as you could connection with people that were going through things that we might be going through, or people we know are going through. And so in answer to your question, which story, I mean, God dang, they're all moving. I mean, there's stories of somebody who lost someone to cancer, that was like somebody who taught him how to see the world with a whole new pair of glasses, right? Taught him how to love and be loved. And then he loses her right away, but he was able to take from that um, the idea that he could be his best self and learn to allow people to love him, even after losing the love of his life, and find love again. That's an amazing story. Um, there's a story of a woman who used her strength that she gained through surviving a brutal 4-year abusive relationship, and how she learned, somebody else who learned how to love and be loved out of that. And it was the strength of that love that got her through 5 different cancers in her adult life over a 40-year period. Um, there's a wonderful story about a guy who's, you kind of remind me of him, like macho, like take life by the balls. Like I'm the guy, I'm there to teach, and I'm tough, and, all of this stuff. And, he went through an absolutely brutal cancer that he was not supposed to survive at any level. And he survived by not accepting help from anyone. Because he couldn't show weakness. He was too macho. He was too, I got this. I don't want to let anybody in. But we found out through talking for a couple of years that why he didn't want to let anybody in was because he had been abandoned so many times in his life at most critical times. Probably the most moving was when he was 6. He walked in and happened to witness his mom taking her own life. And the ultimate abandonment that you could imagine. And beyond that, some other times that he was abandoned, that no way he was going to let anybody in. And to understand that kind of loneliness and self-isolation and just the darkness that he went through life. But then he learned that strength comes in letting people help you, and strength comes in believing that you're not going to be abandoned every time you let somebody close. And now he's like the most caring, loving, outgoing, I'll help you, you help me kind of guy you could ever imagine. And so, story wrapped around tragedy, but very inspirational. So every one of the stories I could tell you is my favorite, because the lessons that I learned, or the lessons that these people, learned or came to terms with very difficult things. For me, it was very positive, uplifting, moving experience.
They all sound like really powerful and transformational stories, and it's so helpful to hear what people have gone through to know that we're able to do it. It's kind of like the 4-minute mile, right? Everybody thought the 4-minute mile was impossible. Then one person does it. Then it kind of opens up this realm of consciousness. If you know that, or possibility rather is a better way to put it. So if you know somebody's gone through it and has successfully gotten to the other side, you know that there's a pathway for you. And when it's very, very dark, it can be very challenging. And I'm curious, what did you learn? Did you find any themes or insights around how do we accept or heal from tragedy, like the suicide of someone you love, or trauma for the abandonment of the the mother? That's awful. Like these are just awful scenarios. And so how did those individuals or family members get over that trauma or heal and be able to kind of see the light after something so horrible?
Yeah, well, you said it just a minute ago when you said you never know what people are going through, right, or what they have gone through, and you think, that, oh my gosh, how could I ever handle that, right? How could I ever in a million years handle that? And then you talk about the things that you've been through, and people, if they knew, they'd be like, how in the world could you ever handle that? Like, I could never do that. And so we just don't know, because we're just living our lives, right? Every single person I spoke to, Matt goes, my story's not that interesting. Meanwhile, I'm hearing their stories and I'm like, oh, wait, you came out of chemo and got addicted to drugs, painkillers. And then you were so addicted to painkillers that you turned to a life of crime. And then you were incarcerated, and then you had cancer again. And this time it came to take you, but you survived it and raised a special needs kid and all this stuff. And this guy's telling me his life's not that interesting. And I'm like, what? Right? So I think what is there to learn is that we never really know what's behind the idea of what people have gone through or what they're going through. And we can also say that about the person in the mirror. And I think once we accept the fact that it's okay to show some vulnerability, it's okay to allow people to connect with us. They might not always say the right thing or do the right thing, but most people that we would want to do that with would have good intention, even if they don't know how to do it, or we don't know how to allow them to do it. But if we can come to terms with the fact that it's okay that our lives aren't perfect and nobody's judging us for it. And because we know that their lives aren't perfect and nobody's judging them for it, but we can just connect in a real authentic way. I think that healing begins with that honest, vulnerable, just lay it out there and just, okay, this is the reality. Now, how can I learn from it, and how can I grow? How can I move down the path? And most people do that naturally. Most people do it, but we do it isolated around the trauma. We don't let people in. We don't want to bring others down. We don't want to make our problems their problems. We don't think people will care. People have abandoned us in the past, so they're going to abandon us again. There's that trauma usually is a journey we take alone. And once we come to the idea that our trauma is real, is probably as real as yours or anybody else's, then we can be safe to talk about it. And that's where we heal from.
Yeah, absolutely. And ideally everybody's got at least someone that, cares about them. I think everybody's usually got one or two or more people. And I'm reminded of a really good friend of mine, a very strong guy. He's, he's into like tactical stuff. So he's just like, everything about, he's like basically Rambo is the best way I can describe him.
Nice.
And he just knows all the stuff and is very strong. And, recently went through, a tough time, and I hadn't heard from him a bit, and I knew that he was going through a tough time, and kind of just reached out and just let him know that I was there. Finally, after months, I get a hold of him and learn a little bit about what was going on. And he goes, and he's the kind of guy that if I need him and I'm 10 hours away or whatever, he'll show up. There's no question. One text to get a hold of him, he'll be there to help me with whatever I need. And he goes, yeah, man. He's like, I'm there for you if you need, and I know you're there for me if you need. And I go, yeah, buddy, but you got to remember, like when you need me, you got to ask. I can't do it for you. And I came up with an analogy in my mind after, because he's a tactical guy and I like martial arts and tactical stuff too. And I said, well, if you're like a Navy SEAL or something and you're going into wherever and you're a team, if one guy hurts his leg, you got to make him better, because it brings the whole team down. You want that person at 100%. So you're not saying anything, it's not helping anyone, and we don't want you to be down there. This is what we're for. And also too, I feel like, I don't know where I heard this, and I don't know if I can articulate it the same way that I remember, but it was kind of like this idea is that if you don't ask for help where people are willing, then you're kind of dishonoring that person in a way.
That's
that
absolutely the truth.
That they want to help, that they want to be able to feel useful tool, right? It's like, I've learned this so I could be useful at this time, right? I do want to be there for you. Like that's something. So you're kind of taking that away. And again, it was articulated much better. Maybe you can kind of speak on that if you kind of know what I'm talking about.
Oh, no, it's a great lesson. I mean, you bring up a lot of great points, but certainly that last one is a very, very important one, and one that I'm still learning and have recently really come to terms with. I love hosting, right? And I have lots of people around, and I'm always taking care of everything, and people offer to help, and I'm like, no, and I got it, and it's all good. I want you to relax and enjoy it, whatever. And my wife pulls me aside and she's like, dude, you're ruining people's experience, right? And I go, what? And she goes, yeah, you can take care of them, but they want to be a part of it, man. They want to be a part of it. They want to help. They want to feel like it's their experience too. And you're depriving them of that. And I'm like, oh shit, I think you're right. And so the problem becomes that if we are not safe to be our true authentic selves, because either we don't feel safe, or we got crap in our own head that's preventing us from connecting with people on a safe level, then we just don't get to connect at that deep level. And for you to say that about your friend, and for your friend to say that about you, there's this kind of thing where you go, okay, we're safe to say, if I ever need you that bad, you'll be there. That's a very vulnerable thing to say, right? Because really, I'm going to be at a point where I need you to drive 10 hours to come save me on. Oh yeah, I might actually need to call on you, but at least I know that you're there. Like I might not ever need to, but man, that's a very vulnerable space. So I think the key to all of this comes in: stop putting on fronts, stop making up for bullshit, just be your true, authentic, real self. And sometimes that means you're going to be the strongest person in the room. And sometimes that means you're going to be the person that needs the most attention in the room. It just is what it is. And both are strength, both are weakness, if not dealt authentically.
Yeah, 100%. Authenticity is absolutely key. And what we're touching on here, when you're asking for help, it's not, getting everyone to do it for you, or kind of what we see a lot in our society today is like this, I don't know, like the young kids don't want to work as hard, right? It's like you gotta grow yourself up. You can't have everybody do it for you. You know what I mean? You have to take responsibility for yourself. Just move in an authentic way. And when you have that strength, you can also have that vulnerability at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to do everything that I can, and this will help. Like, one small thing is we're moving our house, and I redid my basement, right? And so I was like, is this possible? Well, my neighbor's very handy, and I would have needed a couple friends to help. So I just called and said, hey, is this possible for you to come over for a couple hours? So we had 4 people come over in 2 hours, ripped out the whole basement and started laying a whole new one without their help. So I'm willing to do the work, and be there and show up and, and do everything. I'm not just say, just do this for me, no,
Right.
I'm engaged and I'm responsible in every way that I can, but I require their assistance to make this bigger thing happen. And it's like the idea too, is like, it's never just one person that does it. Even in solo sports, like the Ultimate Fighting Champion, where the best fighter in the world, or triathlon, where you're just the only athlete, you have a team. Almost always you have a team of people that support you in that journey, that makes that expression of it, the ultimate. It's like, no, it wasn't me, it's all of these other things that factored into my success. So seeing it that way, I think, is useful. And it's also the idea to respect your entire team, right? Like, you respect everyone in your life with a good, high quality relationship and what they bring, because they improve your life, and ideally you can improve theirs as well. So having that perspective, I feel like, is very important.
It is. But it's hard though. It's hard for people. It's hard for men, especially because you don't want to show weakness. You don't want to not be the guy solving the problem. You don't want to be the guy known as the guy that can't handle the burden. Um, but but yeah, it's tough. I mean, yeah, you see any high performer, and the first thing they're out there doing is thanking their team, and saying we did this and we did that. Even if it's just them that's doing the actual work, it's all the people behind them. But it's really hard, and especially when it comes to emotional issues, it's really, really tough. It's hard to show that vulnerability. It's hard to not judge ourselves, or assume that we're being judged by others. And so that's where the difficulty comes in. Is it's very hard to have these conversations, to bond with people in an authentic way, because there's so many limiters to it. And I can't tell you, Matt, how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people I've spoken to who have said something like, oh my God, I'm super close to my dad, but you know what? When he was dying of cancer, it's just like, I didn't even bother to ask him how he felt about like the fact that he was going to die. Like, I mean, I helped him through things. I took him to the doctor. We did all this stuff. And, I mean, we had some meaningful discussions, but yeah, I never really went there about like the really hard emotional stuff, because man, I didn't want to bring him down, or I didn't know how to start the conversation or whatever. And it's very understandable, right? How many times does somebody tell you something that's just like, oh, I can't believe you're having to deal with that. And your answer is like, oh, I'm sorry, man. And then you want to leave as quickly as possible because you don't know what the hell to say. Like, what could you say? Right. But sorry is not the right thing. And oh, it's going to all work out better. It might not be. Who knows what the right thing is, but we don't want to say the wrong thing. So oftentimes we don't say anything at all. And that's where the loss of connection comes from.
Yeah, well, that's again a very powerful insight, because that's the last thing you want to do, right? You don't want to leave something so emotional and big like on the table. And if you just show up, right, don't worry about saying the wrong thing. Just be there. You know what I mean? In the best way, just being present and listening is all you really have to do. And in these cases, you don't have to solve the issue or make it better. I think that's something that people believe they need to make it better or make it easier, where really they just want you to be there. I think that's a lot of it, just to be there.
Right. Or we have to allow people to be there as well. Right. One of the book participants is a woman who's a oncologist, been an oncologist for 40 years at NYU, dealing with male and female breast cancer, and the things that she has gone through. Absolutely amazing. And when I started the conversation with her, I said, hey, doc, we need to go to areas that you might not have talked to other people about. And she goes, yeah, that's fine. And I said, no, I mean, like, even talk to, your friends about. these personal issues. She goes, yeah, I don't really talk about these, kind of emotional things with my friends, because when we get together, we go hike or we hit the art museum or something. And I go, okay, fair enough. But also we can't talk, like, we got to talk about things you don't talk to your peers about, right? The emotional things that I'm sure you all talk about. And she goes, what? She goes, I'm a woman doctor. You think I talk about emotions at work? Are you kidding me? That's just no way. And I go, okay, well, can we go places that you haven't gone to with your husband? And she's like, yeah, my husband and I, we really don't talk about the emotional things about our work. And she was dealing with a very, very important issue on an emotional level. And she hadn't talked to anybody. And I said, well, can we talk about that? And she said, sure, because I never have. And the emotional issue she was talking about, Matt, we could all relate to, is here is this woman, when she started out as an oncologist several decades before, all she was trying to figure out how to do was be successful in a world dominated by men, right? Like, I just want to get more patients. I want to solve more problems. I want to cure more people. I want to do what I can. And she didn't really care about the patients as much as she cared about being successful as an oncologist, right? Now, 40 years later, she's lived this beautiful, meaningful, fulfilling life. And now she has such a desperate drive to get her patients to listen to her, because she knows that if she treats them in the best possible fashion, they'll have a greater chance for a healthier, longer life. And now she's armed with the knowledge of what that means to have a long life and deep relationships and a great career and this beautiful perspective on what life can give to you. And when people don't want to take her advice or don't take the treatment options that she suggests, she knows that might be a danger. And so she's like emotionally driven to say, please, she takes people and shakes them. You got to listen to me. I'm trying to tell you, I'm going to make your life better. I'm going to make you live longer. Right. So she's desperate to do that, where 40 years ago, that wasn't even a thought that entered her brain. And I wanted to understand that so that we could learn how to be better patients for our doctors.
Yeah, that's again, another really powerful insight. And because there's a lot here, but yeah, the emotional side of things, right? To really share and have vulnerability wherever you are on the side of the fence, where if you're the person who could use some help or you're the one who's communicating with somebody who's going through some trauma, just having authenticity and vulnerability, I think, are the key points. And I'm just curious, like, with all of these stories and everything you learn, like, are there a few things that were your biggest takeaways from, in engaging in this project?
Yeah, for sure, Matt. I would say that one is that everybody believes that their story is not that interesting, and everybody's story was very, very interesting. Now, some we weren't able to get super deep with, and that went off to the wayside because I couldn't ask the right questions or they couldn't hear the questions at the right time. But everybody's story was terribly interesting. That was very cool. I think the second thing is, it was shocking how isolating trauma is, and how many people get abandoned during their most important time of need, or also how many people self-isolate, right? How many people push others away because of whatever reason, right? They don't want to bring them down. They don't want to burden them. They think people won't care or whatever. But trauma is often a very lonely place because people do get abandoned oftentimes because we don't know how to deal with them. So we just don't make the call, right? And that's a very, very common thing. So the other thing I would say is that it's shocking to me how much is behind that statement we said earlier about not knowing what people are going through or what they have gone through. It's shocking the assumptions we make about where somebody's at. Like this doctor that I was just talking about, right? What a beautiful career or whatever, but also that was wrapped around in their childhood. At when she was 12 years old, her dad decided one day never to come home and never to be heard from again. Nothing led up to it that she could know or be aware of. And one day he was there. The next day he was gone forever and ever and ever, never to be heard from again. Right. And imagine what that is for a woman, a young girl going through life and trying to find their way and having no answer to such a big question. And she's carried that around her whole life. And you look at her and you go, successful doctor, beautiful marriage, beautiful daughter, great practice. She's a legend, like all this wonderful stuff. And you go, man, she's lived a charmed life. Yeah, she has in some ways, but in other ways, we have no idea what she's going through. Every day of her life, she wonders, why the hell did my dad not tell me he was leaving, and where has he been my whole life? Right? We're all dealing with stuff. And I think that compassion, that empathy, that understanding that, being human is freaking hard, man. And everybody's dealing with crap. So ours is not more important. It's not less important. It's just ours, not theirs. And theirs is not more important or less important. It's just theirs, not ours. How can we connect on a deep level to help each other out? That's basically everything I learned.
That's beautiful. I'm also reminded of this analogy where if you're sitting around a fireplace and everybody throws their problems in the middle of the fire or whatever, or in the middle of the circle, and you can choose somebody else's or you can choose your own. And the idea is that you're going to choose your own, 9 times out of 10. And we don't know what people are going through. And compassion is incredibly important. That's why it's more important to lead with compassion, because you don't know what's behind that. And there's that idea that hurt people, right? There's nobody who's happy and fulfilled and doing okay is going around, hurting people. It's usually there's something missing or there's something going on there. So, if you can treat it with compassion, doesn't mean you get run over for sure. But, just treat things with compassion as much as you can. When people read this book, what are you hoping that they take away from it?
So the good thing about reading is they can read it the old-fashioned way or listen to it on Audible, right? So that's the great thing. So depending on how you are, what they're going to take from it is that each story is self-contained. So it's not a big, long 400-page narrative, like where did I leave off or whatever, but each story is contained. And so there's some value in being able to kind of wrap up the thoughts of each story before you move on to something else. But I think what people will take from it is it's not preachy. It's not prescriptive. I don't give answers. All I do is shine a light on the human experience from as many different perspectives as possible. And I think what the feedback I've gotten from doctors, nurses, patients, loved ones, caregivers, your average ordinary person who just likes to read books, the feedback that I've gotten is that it's given them some insight into how to better approach people that are going through something difficult, or how to allow others in where we might not have before. And so it is a teaching book, in that it's like I can identify, like, oh, I get you, like I see you in a different way. And who doesn't take something from that, right? When you're doing a lot of men's work or a lot of one-on-one coaching, and you get through to someone, it's like I see you, like you get each other, that you can take something from that, and it kind of sticks with you forever. And some of the stories in this book, I think anybody will find that there are things we can take, because we're seeing people in their deepest, rawest, most human form. And it allows us to go, oh yeah, okay, I get that. Like I get it. And then it sticks with you, and you can bring it to your own life and to your own relationships. And so that's what I think people will get out of it.
Well, that's amazing. And I totally agree. I feel like inspiring stories, we learn so much from them, you know what I mean? And we learn what we are capable. And we see, even in sports, you would see somebody do something incredible and you say, you know what, maybe I can't do that, but I could do a portion of that. And I think mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it's like the same idea. If you're dealing with something tough and you just have that reminder of that story that you heard, you're like, you know what, if I heard that, there's a path for me to get through this. There's a path for me to not only heal from this, but to then, move to that next step where I'm fully empowered and I'm, kind of showing the way for other people, because that's what's on the other side of trauma, is full and complete living, full, authentic, powerful living. So this has been really beautiful. And I'm excited to hear more about these stories in your book. Is there anything that you wish that I'd asked, or that you want to leave the listeners with before we close the show?
No, I mean, listen, I could talk to you all day, man. I mean, honestly, we really could. I could learn a lot from you, and I love talking about this stuff. So no, I think we covered it. I think what's important is it's rare that you could say the wrong thing if you're coming from that place of listening, that place of caring, that place of being human, that place of understanding that you're not there to fix it. You're not there to judge it. You're not there to compare it, but you just want to be there. That's a powerful thing. And it's what we want, and it's what other people want. And it's okay to not always get the questions right or the answers right. Just be there in a way that allows the questions to be asked and the answers to be answered, right? And so, again, I don't like to be preachy about stuff, but I definitely learned that just taking a deep breath and being as present as possible, as often as possible, has allowed me to have the most impact in other people's lives, and certainly has allowed them to have the most impact in mine.
Beautiful. Yeah, I totally agree. And I love the intention of this book. Hopefully people will read it and learn how to be there for others, and then also learn to open the door when they need help themselves, and all the other beautiful nuances in between that these stories will share and teach. So thank you for writing the book and your work and everything that you do, because you're constantly doing something to support and to contribute in some sort of capacity. If people want to find the book or more about you, where should they go?
They go to my website, cycleoflives.org. Books are wherever books are sold, Amazon, Audible, Barnes and Noble, local bookstore, whatever. The books are there. Electronic, Audible, or old fashioned, book. So that's pretty cool. And on the website, you can see the charities that we support. And then also learn about, I do expressive writing workshops, which are just phenomenal. Yeah, they can learn about all the stuff that's going on. And if you're interested in this area, it's, I find it fascinating. So if you find it fascinating, let's just connect and see how we can help each other.
Amazing. And so you say your website, David Richman, is that what it is?
Yeah, well, I have,
Lives.
It's cycleoflives.org.
Okay.
Or you can just look me up, David Richman, and Cycle of Lives, and it'll take you there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And like I said, for writing your book and the work you're doing and constantly putting out the intent, and walking the talk. It's important and appreciated. So thanks so much for your work.
Oh, you're welcome. You too. And geez, if you ever, have time to work with a non-athlete, man, I could learn a thing or two from you, because I know you deal with a lot of high performers.
Yeah, man. Sounds good. Well, we'll stay in touch.
Perfect. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. Take care.